financial services, asset management, etc., in order to then take the story that we want to tell about sustainability and speak in the language of the stakeholder within the business, and start there. You can get it to make sense in their language from the position that they see the world, and also the practical pressures that are on them. What is it that their job is, and what is it that they need to deliver, and understanding how you might actually interrupt that in some cases, or you may be able to complement it. But you almost need to go into their world rather than expecting them to come into yours. So I think that's really important, and figuring out ways that work, but basically never giving up in doing that. So it could be conversations where you make good relationships. It could be, enhancing academic knowledge. I think when we spoke yesterday, we used the example of logistics. If you need to speak to somebody who's a logistics manager, nothing about logistics, you need to probably learn some stuff about logistics in order to have a conversation about these issues within their context, so that you have some sort of common language between you. And I've found that then sort of builds a rapport where, and they ask you pertinent questions, which then are a trail, to be able to then explain to them, they guide you with the questions that they ask once you've kind of got a bit of foundation with them. But it can be informal, it can be through relationship building, it can be through some sort of formal academic type of training, which often is done after hours because you really just trying to understand the other person's perspective. So I think that is important. Go to them. Don't wait for them to come to you, and be willing to do what it takes. And if you've got 12 or 15 different people all doing different jobs, you've got to learn a little bit about all 15 roles, and particularly the ones that are very important to influence and to bring on the journey. I think that being said, over my career, what I've found is there's this temptation, I think, among all professionals, but particularly in sustainability professionals, for us to want to know the answers, and for us to want to go into a conversation, which at times we know is going to be tough, with a nice polished answer. I think there's something to be said for just being authentic, that this stuff is not tidy. It's complicated. It doesn't come in a nice tidy box with a bow on it. And I've found that the more authentic I am in the process, instead of pretending to have all the answers, instead of pretending to understand your context perfectly, the more authentic I am in the engagements that I have, the better that those engagements go, including acknowledging I need to ask you a bunch of dumb questions about your part of the business. I don't live and breathe it, so can I ask you like a few dumb questions so that I can frame what I'm going to say into your context. And I think people, in general, it can feel very vulnerable because sometimes it's a tough conversation. I think in general, people appreciate authenticity. And that goes a long way to sort of building relationships. So I think a combination between like really sort of hone your skills, stand in their shoes, but also be very authentic in how you speak to people to bring them along. To my mind, those two things have been pretty critical in order to really get people on board. Not sometimes you drag people, but if you understand the context and you really apply your mind, it may not be in the first conversation. You may have a conversation and somebody is really a naysayer. They really don't have time for this because they've got a job to do. If you understand their context a little bit and go away and think about it, you can probably come back and sort of reframe it in a better way in the second conversation. And if you just keep going back and have the courage to do that, I think eventually you do find ways to get onto the same page and bring them along on the journey. Just by way of an example, it's a really beautiful example. Many years ago now, I was working with an asset manager, which is obviously a bunch of smart people in the financial sector, talking about ESG integration into decision-making around how they invest, which was what it was that I was asked to do. And so I had a whole bunch of sort of workshop one-on-ones set up with different people across the business to try and understand their perspective and to try and sort of frame, what is it that they need to do? What do they need from me? What do I need from them? And in one case, one of the asset managers came in and basically said, I've been asked to be here for an hour with you. Or I've been told to be here for an hour. I don't want to be here. I've got better things to do. So I'm not giving you an hour. You've got 5 minutes. And that's how the meeting started, which was super awkward. And I think in a situation like that, like you almost feel like you want to clam up and like go and cry somewhere in a quiet corner. But my response was, well, let's make the most of the 5 minutes that we've got. Asked him a couple of questions and then delivered actually some useful information to him. And in that case, our meeting went on for 2.5 hours, not the original scheduled hour. And he challenged me a lot, but was able to sort of navigate my way through, the challenging questions that he was asking. And we were both able to be respectful to one another in that exchange. So I came away, obviously, from that conversation totally frazzled and sort of thinking, oh, my word, like that was really hard. And I, quite frankly, wasn't sure if it had actually resonated with him in the end, or if it was just challenging me for 2.5 hours, which I felt like I was on trial almost. But, fast forward 6 months and then onward to a year. And that very first conversation where I allowed him to ask me the hard questions that he was really bothered by. And I stood in the space, in the discomfort, and didn't run away. And I didn't just say, well, you're a moron, like you get it. And I also didn't go the compliance route, like the board sent me, that's why you have to sit with me. Or because, there's some compliance requirement. Of course, that's important, but it's particularly helpful in terms of building relationships. But fast forward like 6 months and a year, the penny had dropped with him in that initial meeting. And he then went on to actually research to validate some of the answers that I'd given. And he actually upskilled himself. I think he was half researching to try and come back and undermine the answers that I'd given him. And what he actually found was, hey, actually, there is something here. And he was then actually, in subsequent conversations, he was actually able to then articulate to me what was materially important to him, which I could not have actually guessed. I could have taken a great guess, but it wouldn't have been perfectly accurate. So as he upskilled himself and we had better quality conversations, down the line, he was able to then sort of mirror back to me to say, the reason actually that I think this is important is because of X, Y, and Z. And I couldn't have guessed that. So it turned into quite a complicated conversation with him. But over time, he actually got involved. It was enough of a bothersome issue for him that he actually went and made the effort himself. I understand, now that he's actually almost completely converted in terms of the thinking that sits behind this, and he's sort of gone onwards. So I think that, but long and short is we really need to bridge into other people's space to understand the people that you're talking to, what it is that they're doing, what their pressures are, what the day-to-day looks like for them. And then over time, they'll bridge into your space, and sometimes it is hard. It's through awkward, hard. And they're not always pleasant. But, if you can hold your ground and you can make sense, in front of them, often they'll put the effort in the other direction as well, and they'll upskill themselves, or with your help, you can bring them on that journey.
Thank you so much. And it's, the power of 5 minutes discussion where you mainly listen and ask questions. And I think that's really about that. Is often I hear, and we all did it. We all went and say, oh, by the way, this is what we're going to do. And what you're saying is actually, no, listen to them, learn, listen to understand, not to just tell them. And it's about building relationships. Thank you. And thank you for being authentic. I mean, I think this is so important. I think also it's not just important in terms of just positioning the relationship, but also making sure we don't make mistake, because I think we have a lot of our sustainability mistakes that have been made because no one wanted to say that they were wrong or they didn't know. So Laetitia, thank you so much, Liz. That was fascinating. Laetitia, on your side, what was important in bringing them beyond a vision? And you spoke about stakeholder engagement and capacity building. What were some of your experience around this?
Yeah, I suspect we're going to have quite similar things, because I was just looking at and hearing what Lee was saying now around finding the hook, speaking their language. Finding the hook was what Wendy had mentioned, speaking their language, bridging into other people's space. I always call it as building the business case. So when I was still in corporate, so we have this debate, for instance, a very academic debate, because we're in a business school, where do we do sustainability because we have a moral obligation, it's the right thing to do, or do we do it because we think that there's a business competitive advantage, there's an opportunity there as well? And we have this debate with our MBAs and with our lecturers and with our practitioners and that. And as much as I believe in building the, it's asking me if I'm speaking French as well, but no, I'm not.
It's because of me. All of this is because of me.
I know, it is because of you, Marie, yeah.
And let's not speak about the...
And what I always say, and when I consult and when I work with organizations still, is you got to build the business case. So that is kind of, I think, the similar language to what, Lee and Wendy and the other guys were saying. Are you guys still there? Have I lost you? Okay.
No,
right.
We can hear you 100%.
You guys were all frozen for a bit. So it's build a business case. Because what I've said is I have never in my 20 plus years gone in front of a board or a group of investors to appeal to people's moral obligations or their ethical obligations. As much as I would love that to be the language that is spoken, it just simply isn't there. So you got to be able to build that business case, whether that's, referring to speaking their language. So for me, is you got to be able to figure out where others benefit from it. And that's the thing to do. Because as Lee says, it has to go beyond compliance. And that already, if you go beyond compliance, already gets you kind of in the competitive space. And whether you're not in a private sector, whether you're in government or a parastatal or an NGO, you still want a comparative advantage. We always want to get more access to funding. We always want to do better than others. We always want to, show that we're leading by example. And therefore, we got to build this. That's how you buy in my experience, from especially a private sector thing. Part of bringing people along and, following on this vision and all of those things is, once you have this vision, now we got to have clear objectives, but we also got to celebrate milestones. So when we do, we got to unpack this. It's not good enough just to have this stretch vision of where we would like to go. We unpack this in terms of the business case that I talk about. For me, there's got to be alignment with the corporate strategy. Ideally, it's got to be integrated in the corporate strategy. Otherwise, what we do with is we sit with all these silo strategies that have different levels of priorities, different levels of buy-in, and it seems as though sustainability is something that we add on instead of something that we build in. And I think if we truly want to start changing things, we have to build sustainability in. And that's why there was a question earlier about integration. I think we also say integration's hard. Integration's really hard. If it was easy, everyone would do it well. But it really does create that longer term holistic value. For me, you got to balance adaptation and perseverance, because on the one hand, you want to be flexible, because you do want to listen. Don't engage with stakeholders if you're not willing to listen. That's the first point. If you're just doing it to tick a box, then you're also not learning. So there's always got to be a level of adaptability, but you got to kind of balance that with just persevering, because sometimes everything feels like a failure in the middle, because you're hitting obstacles and you're not making as much progress as you wanted to. So you kind of feel as though, let me pivot, let me change, So for me, and that only kind of comes with experience and engagement and talking, is when do I persevere versus when do I pivot? When do I have that adaptation? Because I think we do sometimes a little bit of too much. Sometimes we just persevere for the sake of persevering, and sometimes we just adapt because we think it's not really working, and because we're having teething problems, or we haven't figured out something and we're not evolving. I think if we want to bring people along and not just issue standard operating procedures or strategic incentives or KPIs or performance measures, is you got to create the space for reflection and the space for sharing, because you are asking people to do something differently. So the conversation, I thought Lee had a lovely kind of analogy on one of her key kind of remembrances, and I've had those ones where I can remember you go into things and you're not necessarily there to listen because your passion is just on, you know, getting your objectives done. But if you are not creating the space for people to reflect on their own activities, but also on where the strategy is going and the ideas are going, and sharing that, is going to happen outside of your control or influence or even debatability. So how do I create these spaces so we at least do this in a transparent way? I think there's for me an element of fostering a sense of ownership. So it doesn't become because the sustainability department says so, or the CSO said this, or this manager said that, and this is to me linked to the business case, is how do people take ownership of that? So how do they see the benefit? How do I make sure that they see the benefit and not because I'm telling them to do it? Communication for me is important, and I know it seems like always this little soft skill thing, but we got to communicate clearly and simply. And that means, especially in sustainability, we got to be able to develop this capacity beyond just the acronyms that we love and the technical jargon that we love. But if I want to build the sense of ownership, again, I got to not just speak my sustainability language, I got to speak the language that Lee was referring to, an operational person, a procurement person, an HR person, a finance person, and that. And then you got to provide the resources and the support. You know, do not think that it's going to magically appear. So you got to be able to make sure that you persevere, that you create the resources. And that's not just financial resources. It might be skills. It might be, again, a space for reflection. It might be a shoulder to cry on. It might be having to take some of that, you know, tough conversations that Lee was talking about, is how do I provide those resources and support? And I think that's it for me. Thanks, Marie.
No, thank you so much. And really interesting that creating the space for reflection. And I think that's something that's coming more and more in the sustainability world, to say, like, it's not a direct line. And Lee referred to it. It's complex. It's difficult. And how to allow for a safe space to say, well, we're not going in the right direction. And then ask the question, I never thought about it or articulated, but about when do you decide this need a shift of direction, or we need to push further? And doing that on a collective way, really important. And if you don't do it, then someone else might do it for you where it's not collegial. So thank you for this. Yase, I want to ask you, same question to you, but also more from a supply chain perspective. We spoke about the people inside our company, but now if you are dealing with a supply chain, suppliers, even clients, how do you go in engaging them and bring them on board in terms of that implementation journey?
Thanks.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Mary. I think my experience has been one interesting in that you'll almost find in each and every organization people who are in the supply chain, who are experts, as Lee had said, within their work they're doing. They've created and built a relationship and a strategy and operational plan within their suppliers, and coming in to influence how the sustainable objectives of us as Unilever are extended to them. You are always almost immediately met with all sorts of reasons why it would take long, or all sorts of reasons why it would not work almost immediately, and how people still want to have control. Because the one other very important process within this, what Letitia and Lee spoke about, was the element of bringing people on. So I had to take meetings with each of the divisional heads and to understand from them what are their passion projects, what are their pilot projects, to really get into that work. And because they saw me having quite a huge need to learn about their work, and they then saw me as someone who would actually work with them in ensuring that the sustainability objectives are properly aligned within their work. It was very easy for me to then start meeting and understanding the processes that they work with. It took me some time to understand the jargon. I understand what you're talking about when these people who are super smart and they've been doing this all of their lives. They don't need someone else to come and tell them that it must be green, because where is the money going to come from? So understanding those their passion projects. And one example of this for me, it was when the guys were in the in supply chain, and they introduced me to a project of a pilot project that they're working on, and the passion that they shared, the work that they're doing in that project. I understood that they wanted to be at the highest level of, or highest standard and operational level is possible. So I started coming in and helping to build that with them. And by doing that, I was then able to be exposed to all of their operational systems within this one project. And because of those learnings of understanding how they're sourcing their products, they are processing their products, what is impacting them far as environment is concerned, what is impacting them far as policy is concerned, and the governance and even some of our internal policies. And now working with a project like that, with someone who's got influence on the bigger and extended part of the business, it becomes easy to now, when you have both built this, for them to come back and say, you know what, you remember that idea that we got in this project? We can actually, I see that it could work on this one. The bringing the people along is as important. I think everyone has articulated it. But I think more than anything else, for me, it has been understanding what are the projects and what makes the people in supply chain tick. I adopted a project of farmers in KZN. And as we were going on this project and investing a lot of training, capacity building, ensuring that there's the right infrastructure and everything, I realized 6 months in that I'd left a very important part of this, which was our colleagues at supply chain. As soon as they came in on board, we took them into an immersion of understanding this particular project. And before I knew it, I had them bringing in and giving in their technical expertise and allowing some inputs, technical inputs that are coming from sustainability, that this is a consideration that you could make, and this is a consideration that you can make. And it has gone to a point of adoption in the business, where I even had actually just before this meeting, an hour before this meeting, I was speaking to colleagues who are at data analytics. They brought a presentation and a solution around how you can, it's an AI solution that can check the soil, can check the environments, threats to the crop, and those sorts of things. Now you have a business in this way that has started to have a more buy-in into the importance of one, sustainability, and understanding that it is not just about a tick box exercise, which sometimes happens, but it is about how we future fit. And a lot of things that have been done now are done as pilots, and there's a pilot that will come through and say, we want to test this solution that has been brought to by organization X. how well does it work on the ground? And I welcome those kind of engagements, because for me, it means broader into the business.
Yes.
As I speak to the guys at the factory, and I speak to the guys in the different levels of operation, they at some point will say, yes, so we thought of this sustainability initiative, and one of the factories is doing something around waste. And it's such a big project for them, and it's such an exciting project for them. And I love that is that level of adoption, because they are allowed to also come with their new initiatives where they think that they are starting to meet sustainability halfway into the objectives of the business. And I think that is one way that has been successful, one for me, but I've seen it a way that has been successful for a lot of other colleagues also work in this department.
No, thank you so much. And it's it's amazing when that happened, because suddenly, and you can't, as a sustainability or ESG manager, know all the technical solution or develop all the solution, but all the people within that department, when you bring them on board, get excited, and they have the technical knowledge and the financial knowledge and the value chain knowledge that you don't. And certainly they start actually taking, I think everyone spoke about that sense of ownership, and they do it. And then it's it's also really rewarding as an individual. You can see it, they get excited, and then it's like, okay, what next? And then suddenly they are the one pressurizing you, and you're like, oh, easy, tiger, let's take it easy. So no, it's amazing when that happened. And also it's amazing when it happened also with your broader supply chain and stakeholders. So not just within the company, but with your supplier, with your key stakeholders. We've seen it where you start working with NGO, you start working with other of your small scale farmers, for example, and that become an amazing ecosystem. So thank you so much for sharing this and very practical way to look at it. Wendy, on your you have so many examples that you could share with us, Wendy, around this. But I just wanted to know if there was one specific point that you would wanted to bring to this discussion.
Yeah, so I agree with what everybody is saying. Do you want me to talk a little bit about the monitoring side of things?
If you felt like it, or at least, and I think it relates to what Letitia was saying also, is how do we know we're on the right track, and how do we manage that, and how do we...
Yeah, Letitia did cover some of it in her overview, but maybe just a little bit in depth, is that I think we also have to realize that the business then gets on with the business, and they're not always prioritizing what we want them to prioritize. So keeping that contact is really important. And from a support point of view, what can I do to help you do this? But I think it's also important from an accountability point of view. So if you're going to Exco or board to present, to take the people from the line along with you. Don't present on their behalf. Let them say where they are and what some of their problems are, where they need help. But you sort of work from an unblocking perspective to try and help them with either governance processes or unblocking funding or whatever else is needed. And I think the other thing is to work with other people in the organization. So most big organizations will have risk, strategy, planning, sustainability, audit. And then they might even have then an implementation office as well that also looks at the implementation. And I've found in my experience that working with all of those people, because they are places in the organization where everything comes together at one point. So if you really want to look at implementation, you've got to, first of all, upfront, as I said earlier, look at the risk side, make sure you've addressed those things, monitor what's changing in your context, then monitor from the integrated strategy. And I agree, it's much more difficult, but I think at the end of the day, it is much more efficient. To then monitor that and say, what is happening? Why is this not happening? How's this going to impact from a systemic point of view, other things in the business, and then try and unblock and work with them on a continual basis And I've also had a lot of success working with internal audit, because they can sometimes do things that you can't. And they are going and checking anyway and looking at, what's the progress, what are some of the things, and doing proactive audits. We used to get audit in and we would do proactive assurance up front of developing the integrated strategy, so that you really start thinking about those risks and the implementation risks before you've even got there, and build in mechanisms that can help you keep the thing going, either through contingencies or through having reserve funding that you can bring in at the last minute. And then the last point I wanted to make also was, using the exco and board process as well. I think that's really important. And because it gets them on your side. And if you're going together with strategy right in the beginning and risk when they're doing their risk report, they've already seen what you want to do and they've bought into it early, but then continually going. So we used to often go as combined departments to exco and board and say, this is what's happening. Here are some of the problems. It just gives a better impression of you being working, co-creating with your colleagues, but also working together. Because if you're in line and you're getting a request from risk, and then you're getting a request from audit, and somebody wants you to give information on this the whole time. So collaborating across those functions within the business at corporate level to drive the entire process, I think is really important. And to be more agile when things change and shift and you've got to go back and review. So, and I think you will get the people in line a lot more on your side if you show them that you're doing that and trying to not have as many requests to them, which they do get, head office or corporate stress and tiredness, which I think is pretty common. So I would just add that in from a process point of view. And then when you're tracking the risks, as I said earlier, if something comes up, be agile enough to change and shift, and get that in with your governance process right up front as well. We used to say to them, this is not set in concrete. As we go along, we may find things that change. We'll come back to you and tell you when that happens, but because you're also then protecting line, right? And helping them get a better process in place. So thanks, Marie.
Thank you so much. No, and that's fantastic, that alignment, and also being strategic on, who do you need to work with in cohesion and in an integrated way, and how do you use that kind of unified front and approach, and you make the board, the work of the board or the exco much easier, because it's like, well, they're all coming with the same message, so I don't have to struggle with that. Thank you so much. Really, really, really interesting. And talking about like, it makes the decision easier. And there is a question that came in the chat, which I think I would like to actually address it to. It was addressed is Lee, and he asked, it was, as you start doing that ESG strategy and implementing and operating it, and you do it well, and you get the excitement of everyone, how do you manage the fact that you are one person, you are that one CSO, and how do you not drown or become overworked? And how do you manage that proactively? So Lee, if you would like to go, and after Yassi.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think it's a completely valid question, because I do think that is the reality. I think if you're a conscientious person as well, you'll just say, I'll just work longer and harder. But there's only so much that you can do as a single person. So I think there are a couple of things that are important. One, again, come back to focusing on the things that you believe to be the most important things. Again, the materiality assessment for me is that like the map, it's literally the sort of basic map that you can always come back to, and when you feel a bit lost, in order to prioritize and sort of turn the volume down on some of the noise or issues that are important, but there's just not enough hours in the day. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is to slowly but surely just build the knowledge of the people you're talking to on a continuous basis. So as they don't understand something, you might use an acronym or a term, that they're not familiar. Take that time out to use 10 minutes and actually do the teach them a little bit. So the next time that you come around, they've got that knowledge. It sometimes, means you have to kind of stop a wider conversation, but it's an investment that's well made. And then over time, knowledge in the business just generally almost without it being a formal program, you're sort of teaching relevant information to relevant people across the business. So that's, I guess, a good investment up front. And then, I think everybody in the room probably already has a sense that there's a genuine shortage of skill and experience in this space. So you do have to put in the miles to really sort of, if you're building a team around you, understand where people are in that team from a skills and experience perspective, and be willing to put the miles in to sort of get them, upskilled, whether that's formally or otherwise. So be a teacher. So I think that's quite important. And then the last thing from my perspective is communication. So in nearly every meeting, and certainly when it's people that I'm speaking to for the first time in our organization or outside of our organization, or even people that I know really well and have spoken with many times, 99% of the time you'll hear me in a meeting say sustainability is a team sport. And it is, number one, but also by persistently having that message sort of lingering in the background, you get people to understand that you can't be all things to all people. You can't know everything. And also, if they're in the room, they're on the team, and you're part of the team, and it's a team sport. So I think that's quite important, just in terms of communication and getting those people on board. And then, I think, there's a very high risk, and I think probably most people on the call, if you're working in sustainability, have experienced, that sense of wanting to do everything, because I think we're like, most of us are quite passionate, I think, about this topic, wanting to do everything, and then possibly communicating too late, and then it all comes crashing down, and that's totally unhelpful. You lose people along the way, so be realistic, communicate early about what you can and can't do. If there's a ridiculous timeline, some timelines you obviously can't move, like it is what it is. But if there's a crazy, ridiculous timeline, you have to have the courage to communicate back to say, no, we can't do that timeline, but here's the alternative. We can do it not by Wednesday, but I can do it by next week, Monday for you. So I think that's quite really, really important. Otherwise, you tacitly accept the deadlines and timelines that people give you. And they are none the wiser that you actually at risk of drowning until you tell them. And make that call early, communicate early and consistently and frequently, so that you don't get yourself into an emergency where you're basically already sinking by the time you've called for help, and probably a couple of balls have been dropped by then already. So I don't have a nice tidy answer for that, but I think it's a legitimate question, and that's how I deal with it. I don't win all the time. There's a time and a place to accept that you've just got to put the long hours in, and that sometimes you're the sole person that can do it. Like, it can't be shared, for now anyway. But I'm fairly passionate about making sure that we, through community of practice like this one, and in other forums, that we make sure that we're building capacity, and that there is enough sort of skill sort of coming in the pipeline over time. So I think that's going to be really helpful. I often say, if you've been in sustainability for long enough, firstly you start because these careers didn't exist, so you've had to make that transition. But also in the early years, it's felt like you're sort of pushing a boulder up the side of a mountain, up Mount Everest. And, as you get tired, the boulder rolls backwards because you let it go to take a break. And then you've got like a bit more work to do. And it's knackering. It's like totally exhausting. But I think where we are now is a little bit different in personality, where because ESG is like sort of really taken on like this huge accelerated momentum now. That boulder is like got to the peak of Everest and is rolling down the other side of the mountain faster than anyone can keep up. So that you've got a different kind of problem now, same boulder, but you're now on the downward slope, and really it's difficult to keep up with all of this. So it is moving fast, and we just need more people to get involved and commit to this kind of career, from wherever it is that they're starting, and yeah, just go on the journey. And you know, it's not perfect. There is no one course that you can go on or a master's
100%.
you can go on, but just carry on and be part of that sort of broader team and skill set, because we desperately need it if we're looking to achieve anything meaningful in an individual organization, but probably more importantly than that, you know, in terms of our wider economy, etc. We definitely need sort of skills, people, you know, also running after the boulder, you know, so when you're tired, the next person has got energy. But yeah, communications, I think, to my mind, pretty important.
Pretty key, yeah. No, thank you so much. And yeah, and we're learning all the time, as you said. So it's like we have one answer now, and we like in 6 months, I'm sure you will have other insight on this. I can see some people have their hands up. If I can just ask you to hold for a little bit, I just want to finish that part, and then I will open it to the floor. Thank you so much. Yeah, say on your side, how do you not drown and burn out?
I think for me, it's rather difficult. I mean, Lee said there's so much to do, and there's so much to be done, rather, and there's a lot of brilliant ways of doing these things. But I think the way what has worked for me is how I have channeled my work. It took me some time to learn this, but I do less better. Working for a multinational, you have a strategy that cascades from global and right to your market. And what has been important for me is to then my response to their global strategy must be localized, because it must have been within the context of the market I am in. And for me, it has helped me to start refining that to just the 3 and 4 pillars that I should focus on, and that has worked. Another level of how I've managed this is how I've looked at partnerships and finding partnerships and network spaces. I have seen Wendy in different spaces. I think she's a bit of a celebrity in the ESG environment, but it is being in those spaces, listening and learning. Because as you learn, you then understand how not so difficult other activities are, and especially tasks that have and be willing to learn to unlearn some things and unlearn some ways of doing things. One other thing that has also helped me, other than partnership, networking, and learning, it has been when I have the chance, when I have the opportunity, ensuring that I've got consistent messaging. Lee was talking about communication. She's quite right, but must be consistent on that messaging. So for people, it lands all the time. And when it lands with them all the time, I had been quite cheeky on Earth Day, because one of my focus areas is around post-consumer recycling of packaging, and that we do here we make in Unilever. And I saw an opportunity on Earth Day, and I took everyone to a beach cleanup. I needed to speak to the emotion. I needed to speak to the in the motion of it is in that they see the coastal line, how it's affected. And that is their volunteerism almost immediately. Now, when they also see our some of our products, that the packaging that is at the beach, now there's also a different way of looking at waste and appreciating that there is something that is a waste economy. And having them understand that on an operational level, what they do in the company affects the environment in this way. It almost has accelerated their job in the office, in the factory, close to where they've impacted the environment. And I saw that to have worked. And the reason I'm linking this to how I'm managing the load and ensuring that it does not become I think the word that was used there is I just want to get it.
Unsustainable.
It's not ease. It's not a chaos. It is because bringing now people on board, it is also bringing back closer to the work that I'm doing and making it more practical. I mean, in Mandela Day, actually, 2 weeks back, it will be 2 weeks back. Again, I took them to, now everyone who came to the beach cleanup the first time was so excited, they wanted to do it again. And I said, I'm suggesting this as an activity for Mandela Day, and everyone raised their hands and they had teams and everyone was out there. It was a great day, everyone was out. But I almost immediately started having conversations with colleagues who did not understand what sustainability is, and to maybe start understanding it from that level of how we're impacting the environment, and now engaging even more. And I had then discovered that there's some champions of the environment, green champions in the organization who are involved in multiple projects and initiatives. And with that, it makes my life much easier. So when I call onto a person and say, it is Yase, they know, oh, it's the sustainability guy. I wonder what he wants. It must be exciting. Because remember, we've taken a person out of their office and they are by the beach, but they are not enjoying the beach, but instead they are making sure that the beach is clean. It is a mindset for them to understand this is one part of sustainability that is important. So it is engaging at those levels. But most importantly, for my work to not be chaotic, I must do fewer things better. That is very key. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, and really important. And as we finalizing here just discussion, I want to go back to the chat and what's coming, and what we are reflecting on is really the importance of that integrated approach to ESG. There were questions about, do we have not a risk to have just an ESG standalone strategy that is not linked to the materiality of the business? And the idea is really that it is integrated, and as Wendy say, if you have one strategy, rather have one than a standalone ESG one. So make sure that integration is really important and bring long-term value across the organization. We spoke about, just now, about how do we make sure that our role function as CSO is not unsustainable and we don't just become just overburdened by our work and doing it well. Kilonzi Charity, I can see you had a question about the sustainability reporting system, like an African context. We will try to reply online on this. But I also loved the comment from Charlie, confirming that it is important to have a ESG value proposition that will deliver value, and that idea of value. And we spoke about the clear vision, the set priorities, having a roadmap and having priorities. I think what was important and what I love was a comment at the end around the importance of storytelling by Makegu. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, but that's really important, you know. And how, as a sustainability professional, can I tell the story? How can I bring it to other and convince other? And what are the skills? Because we spoke about communication, and we're not all very good at communicating. So how do you improve this communication skills of yours and of your team? I just want to pause now to see if anyone in the room want to either ask another question or reflect on your own journey very briefly, or add something to what you've heard that you feel has not come from the panel. Just allow for the room. This is our community of practice, and we all can learn from each other. So I want to see if you have something that you want to ask or add, you can just raise your virtual hand and I will bring you in. I got other question also, but I would like to see. Okay, Shelter, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to thank the three panelists. They did a very good job, and I really enjoyed this webinar. What I like to quickly add, maybe I wanted to hear something about preparation. As a consultant doing ESG consulting for a company, you have to really, really prepare yourself and also identify your strengths and weaknesses and create a team that will be able to help you to operationalize your strategy in an organization. One of the things that I found is that you have to do a lot of literature review. You have to investigate or examine the corporate documents online on hard copies to be able to identify whether that organization has in the recent past has been able to or try to engage with a ESG consultant, or whether they've done any ESG studies or they've done some projects, and what are the strengths and weaknesses or maybe the failures of that strategy before you can go in and operationalize a new strategy. The other one is you have to form alliances within the organization, because if you are going in there, you have to definitely identify who are the guys who are going to be at the table with you and those who are going to be against you on the other side of the table. So before you will be able to operationalize your strategy, you have to know who are on your side and who are on the other side. I think by and large, it is so important to look at there's corporate strategy document existing in the organization. Is it current? Is it old? Does it have anything related to sustainability, in order that you'll be able to advise to improve it or create a new strategy based upon sustainability? A case in point is I went to do a training for an organization and realized that, well, they kind of very well informed about sustainability, but they actually don't really practice sustainability because they don't have any frameworks. They actually don't have a program. There is no position for sustainability officer in the organization, but they have all been saying they're doing sustainability, but they are actually looking at how to replace all the fossil fuel vehicles with EV vehicles, and I think that's sustainability, but it has to be really, documented, structured, in order that to become, a document that they can refer to in the future. That's my comment. I actually like all the comments made. Letitia, Wendy, Lee, and Yasi, I think you are so fantastic, and I like to learn from you. However, before I leave, I want to tell you that there's going to be the first Africa Global ESG conference in Ghana, and I'm going to invite all of you. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Shelter. That's what I like. This is a community of practice.
Sure.
Thank you so much. But thank you for reminding us also, because ESG doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not in a vacuum. And so there's a lot of things. And when you start, because at the moment, I'm getting a lot of there seems to be a trend where companies suddenly get asked by their overseas client, what's your ESG? What are you doing? And then there's panic. And you're seeing a lot of term of reference at the moment to say, we need a quick ESG strategy and we need a quick policy that fill in the gap. And I think if you are a consultant in that, be very clear about the fact that it's not just something that's coming out of nowhere. Most of the time, they already have something in place around sustainability, around water, around social, and we're seeing that a lot at the moment. So yeah, thank you for reminding us of this. Anyone else want to reflect on your own experience or ask another question? I got a big question I want to ask them before they go, but let's see. I don't see anyone yet raising their hand. So you provided us with such clarity on how to go about it, and I really like it. And I agree, Wendy, it's all about culture. It's all about shifting culture, definitely. But what I really would like to ask, and you gave us some practical guidance on the how, but I want you to reflect on when did that need not work out? You know, a lot of, you spoke about reflective space and safe space to reflect and to learn. And often we not, and I want to bring that authenticity, often we don't want to share when it really failed or that didn't work out. And what was that one episode that you learned so much in that process of operationalizing and implementing? So yes, let's start with you. Just very briefly, what was the one souvenir that you remember in your career to say that's where we messed up, and or I missed that, but that's what I've learned from it?
For me, it is having frameworks and theory coming to practice. And for me, M&E, which is a monitoring and evaluation, has been a framework that has, and a method that has been preached, but we've never appreciated how the implementation of it and the importance of it and the impact that it has. And because of that, I have gone into a project and an initiative and driven by passion to do the objectives, which is great. And when we get stuck into a human-centric space that is about the community, and that is the immediate impact that you see, and that is driven by your love for it, by the emotions that you receive almost immediately, I've found myself I've created dependency within those communities, created dependencies within those formations, because now they have an expectation that this entity will always come and buy and give us this, so that we'll be able to do that. And quite key to sustainability, you need to create a sustainable model and a sustainable business. And that is all well said and great. But when you're on the ground and you look at the faces and you meet the communities and you understand how valuable it is, what they receive almost immediately, sometimes you get stuck in that. And you get stuck in that, and you find yourself that at an evaluation period later within that project or that initiative, that instead of have built a independent group of people, a formation that can work on their own, you've now created a group of people and a project that still depends on you. And we're not having those matrix right at the beginning. It has had a very negative, excuse me, this is an office announcement. They're throwing me out, but a lot of us, no, don't worry, there's a lot of us still here at the office. But just to wrap it up, I think it is, for me, it is that. It is not having those matrix and going back to them at every time at the beginning of the project, when you find yourselves at the end of the day. And I could make an example of this work when I did at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. We did an initiative around COVID, knowing very well that some of the relief work that we're doing would not necessarily have a longer term impact. And I'm making this project an example. But I had found myself at the end of just as COVID was ending, that we've created a new dependency now. We've created a lot of communities who are still waiting us to come back and give them a solution for that day or for that month. And that has been the biggest lesson that I've learned. And even with my farming initiatives and my projects, I always ensure that we go back to the matrix of how are you going to make sure that at the end of this period, this becomes a sustainable, independent business away from you. It can still operate beyond you. And so that has been a biggest lesson, and that I've had to learn.
Thank you so much, and so important. We often forget about it. Even when I used to work as NGO, we were like, actually, in our business model, we should be having a business strat plan that got us out of business in 10 years. That's what we should be doing. So no, 100%. Thank you for reflecting on this. Laetitia, on your side, what did you learn from one of the challenge failure?
Marie, I think, as I've mentioned to you before, to learn just one thing and talking about one failure seems like it's almost dishonest, because there were so many along the way. I think for me, it was trying to, learn how to deal with failure and understand how failure is part of the learning process. I think I can reflect on kind of two things, and it to this day kind of bugs me. In my previous role, when I was at Transnet, and we were in one of the divisions of Transnet, the Port Authority actually, and it's something that kind of happened at the beginning of my decade there, and then also towards the end, and I still to this day was like, how did I make that mistake, almost 10 years later again? And I think Wendy might remember in 2002, when we had the World Summit on Sustainable Development in Joburg, and it was very much a kind of a government kind of debate. We were there because Eskom was there and the Transnet was there, so the parastatals were there. It wasn't like in 2012 where there was a whole corporate sustainability forum and business was really behind it. It was very much a kind of governmental kind of approach. And that's the first time I'd met Mervyn King, who spoke about corporate governance, and it's the first time I'd heard about this thing about sustainability reporting. And I can remember with...
Is that me or is that everyone?
Yeah, she's stuck.
It's everyone.
Okay.
Wrong reasons?
Sorry,
She's
Laetitia, we lost you. We lost you for like maybe 20 seconds. You got stuck.
20 seconds. I can repeat that. So 2002, met Mervyn King, heard about corporate governance, sustainability reporting, heard about the first framework on sustainability reporting, and with excitement went back to my CEO, and Marie will remember at that stage it was Siyabonga Gama, who's been in the news for a lot of the wrong reasons, but I found him to be very kind of, a good leader in our space. And I'm like, Sia, we got to do this sustainability reporting. He's like, Laetitia, no, we're a parastatal. We barely do financial reporting. There's no way we're going to do social, environmental governance reporting. And it took us about 6 months of really persevering and saying, I really believe there's value in doing it. But I didn't approach it from an integration perspective. I got it as an add-on. So 2002, we did our first Port Authority in the world, first parastatal in the country to kind of start at the same year. I think Eskom, you guys did your first sustainability report in 2002 and 2003 as well. And we were so happy. But I didn't appreciate the role of integration. It was very much, it's a nice add-on. It's a nice thing to have, so that, we then went through a whole rebranding as Transnet, and we became one organization. And then there was a need to reflect back and wait until everyone's on board before we do things like sustainability reporting. And I kind of realized that we didn't integrate it into the business. I was pushing an idea that I thought was really good, and it was a standalone stuff, but we didn't integrate it. I didn't build that business case. I didn't really build that value add to it. So it became an initiative by our department and not an initiative by the business. So that when there's changes, that buy-in wasn't there. And just before I left Transnet, we did the same thing from a climate change perspective. 2007, I tried to, really impress upon the board the importance of us starting to look at climate change risk, really understand where our opportunities are, where's the stuff that we got to do. And Marie, correct me if I'm wrong, it took us about 2 years to get them to a point where we finally got that. But I made the same mistake, that I was so kind of busy pushing the initiative that it was an add-on, not a built-in. So when I left, there was no capacity built within the organization to take it further. It was a lovely initiative. We had done a lot of work, but I didn't spend time on developing that capacity because I was being either frustrated by people denying sustainability issues on the outside of the sustainability team versus people getting into complete despair within the sustainability team. And Al Gore has this lovely saying that in between denial and despair has to be action. And I kind of made that mistake in the beginning of my Transnet career and also at my end. And therefore, I am such a big believer in really pushing the integration, really not making this my initiative, our department's initiative, and building that business case so it's not just a compliance thing. Because we got a lot of things right by saying, oh, we're going to get into problems with an ROD on this, or we're going to get into concerns from community members and labor on that. And I didn't build the business case. I didn't, do that a lot. And for me, the real successes happened where I took the time to build that capacity and really build that, what is the benefit for the organization? So there's longevity after a department, after a person, after a champion. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you so much. So important, related to what Tiasi was saying also in terms of sustainability, but more also about being intentional right from the design about building sustainability in and not just an add-on. So thank you. Really, really great. Lee, on your side.
Firstly, I can resonate with everything that Letitia and Yassi have said. But I think, if I look back at my career and, if I can pinpoint the things that if I could go back in time, I would do them differently. Many of them have got the characteristic of me pretending that I have all the answers. Standing up and actually being inauthentic. So giving the first answer that comes to mind, because you don't want to be vulnerable and you don't want to say, actually, I haven't really thought about that, but let me think about it and apply my mind and I'll come back to you, which is a much better, that's my approach now. So if any of you become my clients at any point in time, that's what you're going to hear from me periodically, because I think that's the right approach. I think when you think you have all the answers, or you're trying to give the impression that you have all of the answers, I think you rely on the first thing that comes to mind in terms of, and you commit to that as soon as you open your mouth. And it tends to be quite a black and white answer when you do that. And I think if I can go back time, I can actually pinpoint individual conversations or presentations where I've lost people along the way as a result of that kind of behavior. Because they're like, oh, not sure about that. Or I gave a weak answer in response instead of actually saying, great question. Let me apply my mind. And I'll come back to you on that one. So I think that just, again, authenticity. I actually do think that people around us, whilst they don't want to be us, they can appreciate the complexity of sustainability. And when I joined Alex Forbes, actually, I got the most hilarious email from somebody in the business, quite senior, and he was like, welcome to the business. Really happy to have you here. And then he said, he finished it off with the following sentence, rather you than me. I think there's genuinely an appreciation of like, hey, this is actually quite complicated. So when you're not kind of embodying that and being kind of authentic about the imperfection in the journey. I think people pick that up, and I think then you lose them. And once you've lost them, I think it's quite hard to get them back. Yeah, unless you then step into authenticity and say, I gave an answer in that last meeting, and I've given it some thought now, and actually I'm going to change my view on it. And this is actually what I want to, how I want to answer your question. So I've done that a couple of times as a corrective action. But yeah, I can almost pinpoint, you know, and you can almost see it in people's eyes when they know and you know that you're talking BS, basically. You're kind of just clutching at straws for an answer, as opposed to kind of, being vulnerable, I guess. And the less I do of that, and the more that I sort of have my approach. And I think it's good as well to have these prepared kind of sentences where you do say, great question. Haven't thought about it from that viewpoint, but let me apply my mind and I'll come back to you. I think, you know, that's a really important tool, because you've got the sentence already prepared. It's going to come out pretty easily. And so you don't have to jump into like the first answer that comes to mind. But it takes vulnerability. Like, you have to be willing to be vulnerable. And in some cases, that's really tough. But I'd rather do that than kind of fake an answer. So it's quite a personal one. It's not a process-driven one. But yeah, I feel people resonate with it, and they actually appreciate, you know, that the stuff is complicated. And if they don't appreciate it, then you're telling them, hey, this is a complicated issue. Let me give it some thought, rather than give you a shabby answer, you know, without much thought behind it. So yeah, that would be my, I guess, regrets. And I truly can like pinpoint the examples back in time where I wish I could go back and have that discussion again. But you know, we live and we learn. It's just experience for you, right? And then you hope you get even better. And if we have this conversation in 10 years from now, I'll probably have a lot more mistakes to like add to the list. So I think it's a continuous learning process.
No, thank you so much. And I think to be honest, it's being authentic, but it's also being brave to say that we don't know, because that's a shift of culture, because that we didn't have always a space to be able to say that. But mirroring what you want to see and creating that is amazing, and it's transformative in itself from a culture perspective. So it's really amazing. And as Letitia is commenting in the chat box, is we are dealing with human beings. So being authentic and saying that we don't know is really important. Wendy, on your side, what was the one learning from a situation which we could refer as failure?
Yes, I mean, I agree with everything that Lee said, and that example that I was giving earlier about the renewable strategy. I think one of the most, that I saw that as a big failure of myself, but I think one of the biggest things I learned from that is the power of co-creation. And I put that in the chat as well, that by working with people to co-create something is so, so powerful. I think we underestimate it a lot. And it speaks a little bit to what Lee was saying about admitting you don't know everything. So I think it's that co-creation and and embracing diversity and views that you don't necessarily agree with, and in that co-creation process, and including those other voices, because it makes what you come out with so much more powerful from an implementation point of view and a robustness point of view, but also very, very building relationships for the future. And so those issues around co-creation, I think it was a big lesson for me that, as Lee said, you don't have to have all the answers, but that by working with others, you get you get what you want. And my ex-boss always used to say, it's amazing what you get if you are willing to not take the credit for thing. You know, always wanting to take the credit is a real ego thing, you know. And if you flip it and say, what have I achieved by taking this new approach? It's so much richer and so much better than what you did. So for me, co-creation was a real eye-opener, and understanding that how people think. So, Marie and I are both coaches. So that what Letitia said is absolutely true. The human element of things is so important. And just understanding how people think and the biases that they have and how they change through a co-creation process is really, it's amazing. So yeah, that was my, I think, failure. And if I'd done it differently, and not just spoken to people who agreed with me, it would have maybe had a different outcome.
Thank you so much. And we do that so often where we get together and we speak with, we try to convince each other. Meanwhile, we're already convinced, but we speak to each other and it's like, who else do we need to bring in this conversation? Who else do we need to learn from? And I agree that co-creation process is magical. I mean, the moment you understand that, it's like a different mindset, and it's not about you anymore. It's about the process itself. So thank you. And I just want to thank you, like all of you as panelists, as human beings, as CSO, as experts, you have shared so authentically, so vulnerably, but also so reflecting on 20 years of career and just being very specific about how you go about it and what are the tools that you can use. Because in the industry right now, this is where we are, is what are the tools? How do I go about it? What is the process? And we hear a lot of frustration. And I really would like our industry to move from just the fight approach to the co-creation approach. And what are the skills that are involved in this? And I would like everyone on the call to, maybe you can put it in the chat box, but to reflect about, based on what you've heard today from the panelists, what is the one learning that you will take on board from this community of practice? One insight, one learning that landed for you. If you can put it in the chat box, or you can, we have a bit of time, so you can raise your hand. But what is the one thing that you're taking from the discussion today? For me, there are so many, but I would like to hear from you guys or read from you. If you can share it in the chat box or share it and raise your hand, but just one thing. Yeah.
Hey, Doc. They're really throwing me out of the office now.
Thank you so much, Yassi. Thank you so much.
Great. It was
thank you,
wonderful,
thank you.
wonderful, wonderful. I'm honored. I'm hoping that I'll be invited even just to listen to more of these networking sessions. Very fulfilling. Thank you so much. I took some of the advice that I saw on the chats as well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Wendy, Lee, Letitia, and Dr. Mary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, Yassi, and good luck for getting out of the office now. So what am I reading? I'm reading TechHome, inclusivity and listening to other, co-creation and less about taking credit. Love it. The business case must be there 100%. And that's something that often we can forget. Collaboration is crucial. Thank you for this. What is the one thing that you will take on? Build in instead of add on. Yeah, I love this also. Share it with us. What is the one thing? Contextualize the relevance of sustainability 100%. And for that is understand the context and the expectation of others. I got 44 people on the call. I want 44 writing notes. Let's see what we think. Accompagner les PME, parfait. En plus en français, c'est parfait. J'adore. Vulnerable to say you do not know everything. Fantastic. Set a vision. Set a vision is so important. You know, I was facilitating a meeting with you. They've been working on a project for 3 years. And when we just asked them, but what were you trying to achieve? What was the vision? They said, well, actually, we didn't have one. And they spent 3 years with no one actually saying, but wait a second. They got in motion and they just went. Discerning between emotionally rewarding project versus sustainability project. So important. That was such an interesting, and you get emotionally attached. And about sustainability, I learned a new word today, which I wanted to share with you guys. is that some people don't use sustainable or sustainability project in terms of they carry on without us. It's unreliant use. So the user are not reliant on you, which I thought was quite interesting. Unreliant use. I was like, huh. So let's see. Get leadership involved and let them know where they are going. Take the business through a learning journey, 100%, and create a space around this. That creation of space, I think for me was something quite important. What I say, it's called unreliant use. I'm writing it in the, sorry, you can't understand my French, and I have flu, so you are really. Actually, I'm going to put the picture that they showed because I thought that was really interesting. I will share. And yeah, people were asking about the recording. You will have access to the recording also. So let me write this. Alignment with the corporate's authenticity. Well, I'm glad. So Laetitia, Wendy, Lee, thank you so much. It's been fantastic to have you, and thank you for sharing with us. And Christina, I agree entirely. Well, let me read your full message. we all messed up at one point, and we all felt like we didn't know what we were doing, and that is an important part of the entire process. It's a learning curve, and that's 100%. And, you know, I've worked with many of the panelists, and I remember I came as an environmental lawyer, and I was like, well, I know the law, and this is how it's going to work. And then I worked with scientists, and they were like, we have the data, and this is the science. And then I realized we are human beings, and this is not how we make decisions. So the human element is absolutely super important, and that sometimes we don't have all the same skills. So as Wendy said, many of us have actually skilled ourselves in dealing with human because many of us were in the sustainability field because we didn't want to deal with human. Well, you are in the wrong field. It's all about engaging with human. So thank you all for sharing. We will have one more community of practice before the conference, Wendy, if I'm correct. Huh? Yeah, one more in September. And it's a pleasure again. And thank you, Shelter, for sharing the event in Ghana. So it will be shared and people have it. Thank you for sharing your insight. And it's been a pleasure again to have all you on board as a community of practice and carry on doing the great work of being agent of change. Floden, oui?
Yeah. Hello?
Oui? Yeah, can hear you?
What? Yeah, I will ask you, is it possible to share contact of each of us?
That due to the legislation in South Africa, we can't just share. But if you go and join, I mean, I think if you join the app, Wendy, if I'm correct, then you can get in touch with each other. So there is an app, and then you can just pin the people that you want to engage. But we can't share. Yeah, we can't share the contact detail ourselves.
Okay. So don't forget to share the replay.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, community of practice. Take care. And we see you in September, and then hopefully all in October for the conference. Bye-bye.
Thanks for organizing. Thanks, everyone. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.